her senior leadership team for joining me to participate in this public accountability meeting. This meeting is one mechanism I use for holding the Chief Constable and the force to account on behalf of the public across County Durham and Darlington. Since being elected as your Police and Crime Commissioner back in 2021, I have held 9 public accountability meetings. The chosen themes for each of these meetings has been based around general community feedback received into my office, with an opportunity for residents to submit questions around selected areas. All of these meetings have been recorded and are available on YouTube for public viewing and can be accessed through my office's website. This time around, I want to adopt a slightly different approach to give residents across County Durham and Darlington more of a voice about what issues are concerning policing they're concerned about and what matters most to them, and what they'd like me to raise with the Assistant Chief Constable at today's meeting. As well as the online public survey recently carried out over a 6-week period, alongside my office, we've also attended numerous force-wide public engagement events over the summer, where antisocial behaviour, drug use and drug dealing, police visibility were regularly among the public's top priorities. I therefore requested the force focus on neighbourhoods to cover these key areas today. A full recording of this meeting, including all questions and answers, will be uploaded on YouTube after this meeting and will be made available to the public. The recorded meetings enable residents to see how the accountability process works and the role the PCC plays in delivering an efficient and effective police service by scrutinising the performance of the force and ensuring it is responsive to the needs of the residents of County Durham and Darlington. For this morning's session, I'd like to invite Assistant Chief Constable Tonya Antonis to say a few words and provide some operational context and information. There will then be a presentation delivered by Detective Chief Inspector Lindsay Banks-Brown. I will then put the public's questions to the Executive. This accountability session is expected to last about 90 minutes. I'm now going to hand over to Assistant Chief Constable Tonya Antonis to say a few words. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you, Joy. And as you've described, today we're joined by Detective Chief Inspector Lindsay Banks-Brown, who will shortly give us a presentation on neighbourhood crime. Lindsay will talk about how we tackle and prevent neighbourhood crime, describing where we sit nationally in terms of our performance. We'll hear about some fantastic partnership work that we're doing in this space and how we drive performance through high standards. Lindsay will also give you an overview of how we as senior leaders in Durham Constabulary satisfy ourselves through proper scrutiny and accountability that the public of County Durham and Darlington receive the service that they deserve. Before we hear from Lindsay, it might be useful for us just to clarify what we mean by neighbourhood crime, which has a definition set by the Home Office in 2020. So neighbourhood crime refers to the following crimes specifically: domestic burglary, robbery, theft from the person and vehicle crime. And these are the areas which Lindsay will talk about today. Now, I understand that the community questions may vary beyond the Home Office definition of neighbourhood crime and will naturally cover other areas of more traditional neighbourhood and community policing. So after the presentation today, I'll be able to provide some specific updates in response to your community questions that cover areas such as the powers of our police community support officers, how we work with partners to deal with antisocial behaviour, and the work we're doing with young people in schools, and the prevention and problem solving projects that we have in place to try and reduce and prevent future victimisation. But I'll hand over now to Lindsay and she'll take us through her presentation.
Thank you.
Everyone, Detective Chief Inspector Lindsay Banks-Brown. I'm a DCI in the Crime Command, based in the East locality as the crime manager. So apologies, I'm having a few technical issues. So Charlotte, if you wouldn't mind sharing the presentation for me, I'd be grateful if you can.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you. Great. Thanks very much, Charlotte. I'd like to start by giving some background in relation to neighbourhood crime, where we were and where we find ourselves today. The National Police Chiefs Council Policing Vision of 2025 describes a plan for policing over the next 10 years. It shapes decisions around the transformation and how we use our resources to help keep people safe and provide an effective, accessible and value for money service that can be trusted. The vision highlights future challenges, specifically recognition that the communities we serve are increasingly diverse and complex, necessitating a more sophisticated response. Whether it be child sexual exploitation, domestic abuse, cybercrime, or new threats from serious and organised crime like human trafficking or terrorism, the leaders of the service, police and crime commissioners, and chief constables acknowledge that if we are to meet our community's needs, the service must continue to adapt to the modern policing environment. Within every vision, of course, there's a mission, and that's a mission to make communities safer by upholding the law firmly and fairly, preventing crime and antisocial behaviour, keeping the peace, protecting and reassuring communities, investigating crime and bringing offenders to justice, reducing crime and protecting the vulnerable are, of course, the force's priorities. In order to achieve this mission, it's recognised that we must increase partnerships within the community and within other service providers, protect the rights of victims and engage community-led policing to reduce demand. In addition to the Policing Vision 2025, policing has also seen the introduction of the Beating Crime Plan, which is the government's plan to deliver the change that Britain needs with a pledge of less crime, fewer victims and a safer country. The plan steers police forces to combine prevention, deterrent and enforcement and to confront serious violence, neighbourhood crime and antisocial behaviour head on. And we've seen a strong agenda directing the police towards neighbourhood crime beginning in that 2021 with the Beating Crime Plan. And since then, we've seen the government, HMIC and the College of Policing double down on this mission. More recently, the State of Policing and Getting a Grip report from the HMIC have continued with this focus. So what exactly is neighbourhood crime? So it's quoted that there are around 2 million offences in the UK every year against households and individuals of offences that fall under the umbrella of neighbourhood crime. This consists of vehicle-related theft, and by that I mean theft of and theft from vehicles, domestic burglary, theft from the person, and robbery of personal property. Burglary, in particular, which violates homes, is a really devastating crime, and one that, along with other neighbourhood crime and antisocial behaviour, the force are determined to drive down. Beyond these crimes, we also know the devastating impact antisocial behaviour and drug use can have on individuals and neighbourhoods, and we know that these are some of the main areas of concern for our communities in County Durham and Darlington. The Force and the PCC continue to work together to engage our communities, target our activity, conduct long-term problem-solving solutions, whilst being committed to developing our officers, staff and volunteers. So we'll talk a little around the crime rate for neighbourhood crime. The Force has the joint lowest crime rate for neighbourhood crime when compared to our most similar group forces of the 43 police forces in England and Wales, and that's shared with Gwent. Durham also has the lowest overall change in neighbourhood crime in its most similar group, when comparing the 12 months to March 23 with the same period last year. This information is readily available to the public and can be found in the Digital Crime Performance Pack. If I could direct you to the HMIC FRS website in order to locate that data. The Force has the 5th lowest rate of robbery in the whole country. Burglary does edge into the top quartile, but it's roughly at the national average, And sadly, we are adversely affected in County Durham by the poor housing stock within our ex-mining communities, where we disproportionately suffer from vacant premises which are targeted for scrap and antisocial behaviour where a crime is recorded. In terms of positive outcomes, the force proudly boasts the highest resolved outcome rate in the country for robbery, theft and burglary, for all 43 forces, and the second highest rate resolved outcomes for theft of vehicle and 6th for theft from. So if we could take it to the next slide in terms of prevention. The College of Policing Crime Reduction Toolkit summarises the best available research evidence on what works to reduce crime. The force uses the Crime Reduction Toolkit to see the impact of different interventions on crime, how and where interventions work, how to implement the interventions and their cost. For example, hotspot policing, problem-orientated policing, and mentoring are 3 interventions amongst many where there is strong evidence to support that we have been very effective at reducing crime. Earlier this year, the Durham Police and Crime Commissioner's Office, together with Durham Constabulary, submitted 4 bids to the Home Office's 18.3 million Safer Streets Fund, which provides money to evidence-based initiatives across the country that make to safer streets and clamp down on burglary and vehicle theft. All bids were successful, and since the Safer Streets initiative began, over 1,000 people have benefited from crime prevention advice from neighbourhood wardens, police community support officers and crime prevention leaflets. Additional measures such as defensive trellis, replacement gates and crime prevention packs were also funded. Clear Hold Build is the framework for bringing serious and organised crime group threats into neighbourhood policing with a focus on prevention and diversion. And the aim of this initiative is to tackle organised crime groups acting in the neighbourhood, to build community resilience, to improve confidence and trust in the police, and make the area a safer place to live. In the past year, the force have adopted the Home Office-driven Clear Hold Build initiative in Horden, working with the Horden Together project, which includes many partners, including local and central government. The force regularly conducts targeted operations to stamp on identified crime spikes. Operation Solitaire in Durham is a recent example where dedicated resources were deployed to hotspot areas at the relevant times to tackle a spike in neighbourhood crime. This was proven to be very successful, evidenced by a reduction in those crime types for the area. More broadly, the force is onto its 4th cycle of Operation Trident model. This operation sees intensification days around County Durham and Darlington, where, with partners, we take positive action relating to crime and antisocial behaviour within our communities. Integrated offender management has a national evidence base to tackling neighbourhood crime and its causes. Durham's very own integrated offender management is working in line with the national strategy, which focuses on acquisitive crime. As per the national strategy, these offenders are jointly managed by police and probation, and all are currently open to probation, who are the lead agency. The aim of the neighbourhood crime integrated offender management strategy is to make communities safer by reducing reoffending. The force has also undertaken the Crime Stoppers Zone initiative in Horden, where an intensification of the Crime Stoppers strategy has been delivered through the zones model. This includes intensification of media within the community to promote sharing of intelligence and engagement within the community. The force has a dedicated licensing unit with PCSOs who conduct regular patrols and visits to licensed premises. This is supported by the local policing command, working together to reduce the harm caused by alcohol and gambling in our communities. So I'll talk a little bit now around our investigative strategy, which is Op Crystal. The force has driven the Op Crystal strategy, which provides clear guidance to staff in relation to investigative standards, victim care, risk management and supervisory oversight. This has seen improvements in crime investigation, quality of victim care, and has had a positive impact on outcome rates and victim satisfaction. Over 200 crimes are reviewed every month, and scrutiny is applied to cover all aspects of the OpCrystal strategy. The question set used to apply scrutiny is aligned to the HMIC diagnostic questions. Performance data is routinely monitored within governance meetings, and the OpCrystal working group, which is attended by officers and investigators up to the rank of inspector and contends with crime quality, often generates excellent debate and is a safe learning environment where reflective practice is encouraged to develop knowledge and understanding, whilst good work is acknowledged and commended. If there are common themes of inadequacy, further training is delivered to aid understanding. Performance can be monitored to force, sector, command, team, and individual level. The next slide, we'll talk about the structure for operational delivery. In 2021, there was a force remodelling project with a clear vision to build a structure for operational delivery, a structure that was agile, effective, and fit for future challenges. This resulted in a mini BCU, Basic Command Unit, structure being adopted, comprising of 4 localities: East, West, South, and Darlington. Each locality is managed by a DCI and a uniform Chief Inspector who work together to address the issues in their communities. Each locality has resources dedicated to CID, safeguarding, neighbourhood policing teams, response, and intelligence teams. Local accountability is driven in each locality daily through a daily leadership meeting and monthly through a local policing performance meeting. So I can talk a little bit now around neighbourhood crime teams. That's the next slide there, Charlotte. The neighbourhood crime teams are small teams based within CID and each of the localities who are dedicated to tackling neighbourhood crime. The teams, each supervised by a detective sergeant, complement their robust investigation of crime with a problem-solving approach with a clear focus to reduce crime in our communities. Often, those responsible for neighbourhood crime are also those who are facing their own challenges with drug and/or alcohol misuse. The neighbourhood crime teams work very closely with the Integrated Offender Management Unit, as rehabilitation of these individuals is key in order to get the root cause of their issues and prevent further offending. Each team has a uniformed officer or attachment to develop their understanding of neighbourhood crime and enhance their investigation skills. The neighbourhood crime teams are the driving force behind local operations and are pivotal to their success. Crime team sergeants review the positive identification hits, DNA, fingerprints, identifications that have resulted from effective forensic examination of crime scenes and ensure that officers act promptly, making arrest at the earliest opportunity to prevent further harm. Officers will also review similar cases in the area and interview suspects in relation to their suspected involvement. Any admissions may be taken into consideration, an opportunity for the offenders to clear up crime that they've been involved in, but more importantly, to provide some closure to those victims of crime who have suffered harm. In terms of effective forensic examination, which is the next slide I'll talk about. Effective forensic examination is key. Our crime scene investigators are highly trained individuals who deliver an excellent service, and their contribution to crime investigation is invaluable. The force is committed in deploying crime scene investigators to crime scenes, particularly neighbourhood crime, where almost every domestic burglary is attended. Those are all subject of an initial screening to ensure effective and efficient use of the skilled resource. The forensic department boasts a high conversion rate in terms of those crime scenes attended, which has resulted in forensic hits, DNA, fingerprints, as alluded to earlier. The neighbourhood crime team supervisors routinely review these forensic hits seeking out opportunities to solve crime and robustly manage the performance of their teams in relation to this. Other factors, the next slide I'll talk about. As highlighted at the beginning of this presentation, the force has undertaken a mission to make communities safer by upholding the law fairly and firmly, preventing crime and antisocial behaviour, keeping the peace, protecting and reassuring communities, investigating crime and bringing offenders to justice. In order to succeed, we rely a lot upon our relationships with internal partners, external partners, and not least our communities. Local intelligence support is the engine which drives our activity, and I can't emphasise enough how important the link is between our communities, the police, and the Police Crime Commissioner in order to develop that intelligence to enable us to keep driving forward. It is this link which will continue to form the bedrock of British policing. So what's next? There will be continued focus on prevention of crime. We will continue to foster partnerships to solve problems. There will be continued evolution of the Operation Crystal strategy. There will be continued professional development for all staff. There will be further uplift of staff into investigative roles, and we will endeavour to improve data quality and data sharing with our partners. And finally, we will continue to apply and improve scrutiny to ensure we are providing the best possible service to victims of crime in our neighbourhoods. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
And thank you very much for that, Lindsay. I think that's a really comprehensive overview and a sort of puts the understanding of how all these various different elements work together. And I think it's been really useful, obviously, that we're recording this so people can watch through it and get an understanding of how all the different teams and departments, and also how important it is that you've said that the community play a big role in what we do in relation to addressing the neighbourhood crime issues. And so now I've got a list of questions I'm going to put from the public. So the first question is, residents want more police on the street and also PCSOs to be given more powers to deter and deal with neighbourhood crime. How can the force respond to what residents are asking for?
And Joy, I'll take the questions today in the main. And that's really understandable. I think one thing I would say is that through the recent government uplift programme, we have got an increase in police officers on our streets here in County Durham and Darlington. But I think it would be wrong of me not to also remind us that it's still lower than what we had in 2010, but it's still a positive picture for us. And our PCSOs work really well on the neighbourhood teams with our police officers. We've got PCSO recruitment that continues, and we've got a cohort coming in November of around 20 PCSOs. And our neighbourhood model is really important to us, and we're one of few forces across the country that are working really hard to maintain our neighbourhood model and our numbers of PCSOs when many forces are reducing. So I think that's really positive. And alongside that, them having the powers you mentioned there, that you know the public want our PCSOs to have the powers. They do have a number of powers which are given to them under Section 7 of the Police and Justice Act. And of course, the Chief Constable is able to give them further discretionary powers. So these range from everything from issuing fixed penalty tickets, powers to get details from people that are committing antisocial behaviour, powers to seize vehicles and drugs, alcohol and tobacco. So just to name a few, but I think it's really important that what we need to be careful of is that they're not taken away from their core role of community engagement, visibility and problem solving. So great that they've got the powers, but we really want them to be able to focus on their core role. in terms of how determined we are to tackle neighbourhood crime effectively, we've invested in our volume crime team. So there's a team in each locality. Lindsay was just talking about within local policing and crime command, and it's a dedicated resource to deal with the neighbourhood crime that Lindsay's been talking about and describing, and issues around preventing that further harm. And you know that we're determined to keep those teams in place. Lindsay also spoke about some of the intensification weeks that we run. So Operation Trident, you know, that's regularly built into our calendar of events, and that is out there tackling neighbourhood crime and antisocial behaviour. But what we want to do is to develop that further over time, to have more partners involved in those operations, rather than it being police-led and focused, to have more partnership focus on those events. And I suppose finally on this point, and Lindsay spoke about the integrated offender management, IOM, really important for us, because whilst the offenders are managed by probation and it's probation's responsibility, if you like, we work in partnership with probation, with those offenders, and it's all about reducing reoffending. And these are people who are committing the neighbourhood crime, you know, cohorts that are not always, but in the main, it may be because of deprivation or to feed drug habit and other socioeconomic issues that they have. So we work really hard and have regular monthly meetings with probation to look at how we can support those offenders in rehabilitation, to prevent the reoffending and to break that cycle of offending. And we've got some really good successes around that. So it's really important. But I suppose my message from that question is we're absolutely dedicated to tackling neighbourhood crime, keeping our PCSO numbers and engaged in their core role, and getting as many officers out in the streets as we can.
Thank you, Tonya. And I think that, you know, the way you've answered that question was really detailed, and I think that understanding all the elements that's going on in relation to dealing with neighbourhood crime, I think it's quite right what you say, that the PCSOs are at the heart of the community. So it's focusing obviously the tools and powers that give them the most visibility, but not diluting the valuable work that they're doing, because we've got other members of the team that can complement their work. So thank you for that one. The members of the public have also raised concerns around the delayed response to what they believe are important antisocial behaviour and quality of life issues for them. What assurances can you give residents to the issues that they've raised around their fears and concerns around delayed response?
No, and I you know, we absolutely take that on board, and we do recognise, of course, that it's an absolute priority for the public, and we will respond promptly particularly where antisocial behaviour presents a risk to the public. So our neighbourhood teams work with partners to deal with those quality of life issues, mainly through some of our problem solving approaches. And I think it's important probably to say that Durham Constabulary are held up as leaders across the 43 forces in terms of our problem solving approaches, and the work that we do. So mustn't lose sight of that. But I think our powers to deal with antisocial behaviour are quite specific, but it's important that we work with partners as well. So for example, we get calls around noise, which we know is a real issue. If you've got noisy neighbours, that it can really impact on your quality of life. But we have to lean into the local authority who have the powers to deal with noise. And of course, not everybody realises, I think they do think that anything to do with antisocial behaviour all leads back to the police. And I'm not trying to absolve our responsibilities. Of course, we have a responsibility, but it's important that we work with partners. And I think for us, it's really important that we get the response right first time. So if we are the right agency to respond, that we get that response right at the outset. But recognise we don't always get it right. So, you know, we have to continue to work hard on our responses. But we are part of the National Antisocial Behaviour Pilot, looking at policing activity, and we've got 30 hotspots across the force, but that we're working with partners on, and of course with your support, Joy, we've become one of the 16 trailblazer areas, and have received funding from the Home Office to run a pilot to urgently tackle antisocial behaviour, and that's a big step forward for us, but of course very new in its kind of setting up and the work that's being done there to develop it. But I think the Trailblazers work that's been done, although in its early stages, is already showing some really positive results. So I think, again, my overall message there is, I do understand some of the frustrations, but it's not lost on us, and we're actually committed, really are committed to get it right and continue that focus.
Thanks, Tonya, and I think that's really, again, from our side, from the PCC, I can only say, say that the support that you've given and how you've embraced the opportunities to really be a trailblazer for antisocial behaviour and tackling the hotspot areas. But similar to what we were talking about earlier on, is that what Lindsay mentioned is about the importance of the public. The hotspots are only hotspots because people have reported issues in those areas, and we do know, having talking to members of the public, that some residents have been reluctant to ring in or to report or continue to report consistent and repetitive antisocial behaviour. So just a plea to any members of the public that are listening there, if they are suffering for antisocial behaviour, please report it in. If you visit on my website, it takes you to the relevant agencies that can deal with the relevant antisocial behaviour, be it police, housing, or local authorities. So the information's there, and we really do want people to come forward, let us know where the issues are, so we can respond appropriately. Thank you. How do the force prioritise incidents that have been reported and are not considered an emergency? And again, Tonya, this is something when people do ring in, sometimes they get a bit confused of how it's graded, their report. So that this is a question that's often asked from members of the public.
And I think it's a really good point that's not lost on us, that, for some people, if it's the first time they've made contact with the police, it will be a really important issue for them, and they may not understand kind of what is deemed as high priority emergency. Some of the obvious ones that we would respond on, blue lights and 3 night, is easier to understand. But what happens, every call that comes into the force control room is assessed in relation to threat, harm and risk and vulnerability. We call it the Thrive model. So if you hear Thrive, it's threat, harm, risk, investigation, vulnerability and engagement. And through doing that assessment, we're able to prioritise our response to incidents. And it's that assessment that determines where it is in terms of priority, whether it's an immediate response or whether it can be scheduled. So non-emergency incidents that don't require that immediate priority response are generally dealt with agreement for a diary appointment. So in that diary appointment is either in person or via our virtual investigation team, so on the phone or through technology. And the appointments are arranged to suit the member of the public that's called in and made that report. And we just find that's the most effective and efficient way of dealing with non-emergency calls. And of course, people then know when we're coming to see them, and that is how we manage the stuff that's not prioritised.
Thanks, Tonya, and I think it's a credit to all of our members of staff in the control room as well, and I think for the training and support that you've given them, because I think part of it is it's not about responding to the call quickly, because it's about getting the information right from each of the callers so they get the appropriate response. So that might take a little bit more time, but actually it's paid dividends, and I think that's been recognised nationally for the work we do at that initial call to get the right response to the right people. But it does require asking those sort of questions so we ensure that they are getting the appropriate response by the appropriate agency at the right time. So I think it's really good to explain how that work goes on when people do make the calls coming into us. So how does the force ensure they maintain communication following all calls for service in the control room that require a policing response?
And I think that probably follows on from what we were just talking about. Once we've assessed whether it's an immediate response or whether it's a diary appointment, I think the important bit then is that communication in terms of any. So if I talk about ones that result in a crime related, there's a crime linked to it, and we have an investigation ongoing. When the officer speaks to the victim or the person that's reporting it, we take the details, convert it into a crime report, but really important that we look at the needs of the victim, because they will be, they're very personal, aren't they, and very dependent on the individual's needs. And we draw up a contact agreement, what we call a victim contact contract, where we can, with the person reporting, about how they want to be contacted, whether that's via phone, email, how they want that contact and how often. But we also speak to them about any referral to any victim care and advice services. So VCAS, really important that they're offered that opportunity. So that the contract is bespoke to the needs of the individual, and again that's really important to us. And we do know there's some challenges around some of that because of police officers working shift patterns. So we have to be really mindful of, and I think sometimes we need to be better at explaining to people that, actually I'm now going to be on nights for 2 or 3 nights, then off for 2. So you may not hear from me for 5 or 6 days. I think that's something that we're really mindful of through our training, to get that right and manage expectations. So the public are really aware of that victim contact. But we do have a policy here in the constabulary where supervisors will also contact the victims 7 days after. One, to check that they've received the service that they expected, deserve, and if there's any other support they need. So checks and balances through that supervisor follow up within 7 days. And it might be that within that time frame, further information has come to light that a supervisor can add to that investigation. So we do try our very best to keep those contacts going, but do appreciate sometimes it does fall down sometimes. But that's how.
Thanks, Tanya. And I know that, like you say, it's not just an issue for Durham, because I talked to the other 42 PCCs, and the comms and is the demand, isn't it? People want that information, and we've got a very old and creaking system, like an IT system, that we all happen to grapple with and bring it into the modern age. And I know behind the scenes, and it's probably for another day, that there's so much work going into improving the work that we've got by improving the infrastructure, the IT, and bringing it up to modern day standards so people can use it a lot more self-service. And I think that the public will really welcome that when it comes. Can't come soon enough for us, I'm sure. But in the meantime, there is a lot of work, and what we've got is putting the resources there and responding. But I'm very hopeful, knowing what I know, that in the future that's going to be a significant improvement, both from our staff, but also more importantly from the residents to get that improved comms timely as well, that you can make your own appointments, that people aren't going to turn up because they've been taken to a really important job, and keeping people updated. So that sort of, really, we know it's coming down the line, and hopefully people will start to see the impact of all those improvements very, very shortly. Thank you. The next question is a really an important one, about the prevention. Our thing is about prevention first, and I know this is something that we, as a force and as a PCC, we just say we prefer, rather than having respond and demand, we want to prevent crime and prevent victimisation. So the question from this resident is, what work is being done in schools to educate and deter young people from committing or being involved in low-level crimes?
And as you say, Joy, really important for us as the constabulary and for your office. And as I mentioned earlier, we are held up as an organisation that are really strong around our prevention work. So across the force, in the last 12 months, we've visited over 300 schools. It's predominantly our neighbourhood teams that have gone into the schools and looking at raising awareness around antisocial behaviour, but county lines, so drugs and county lines, knife crime, and kind of things around sexting and all the issues that come up for young people. We tend to, if we start to see themes coming out through some of the reporting we're getting, so for example, young people sexting, whatever, and we start to see a trend, they tend to be the focus for us. We'll get onto those quite quickly. So the work in schools, it is ongoing through our neighbourhood teams, but it's broader than that. And I suppose one thing I would say, so for example, coming into the summer months, we did some work around keeping safe around water, which sounds quite simplistic for us, but really important to keep young people safe. We use we've got the Fearless worker that's linked with Crime Stoppers and the work that you've kindly supported. And the Fearless worker does workshops, and a lot of it was around knife crime, but does cover much those broader subjects. So we've got lots of examples of the work that's gone on and the programmes that are done in schools for children. And I think what we're trying to do as well is target some of the younger children as well, primary school age, not just high school age. And we get really positive feedback around our interactions with the schools. So yeah, lots of work, lots of workshops, and that remains a strong programme of work for us.
Thanks, Tanya. And I know earlier this week we launched the Commissioner's Challenge with the Durham Agency Against Crime, and I think the work that the team do with the mini police and the peer support and the cadets, I think that's really good, because that's it. From sometimes it comes better from peer to peer, and if we involve young people in that part of that prevention and the education side, I think that's really helpful. So again, I appreciate the work that team does alongside the neighbourhoods as well, and getting that message out to the different schools across County Durham and Darlington. It is obviously time consuming, but absolutely vital to build those relationships up with the neighbourhood teams, get the prevention messages out. And I think from, I meet regularly with the local judge, and he would say start as early as you possibly can. So absolutely right, Tonya, that the primary schools is a good target to get that education messages in as soon as we possibly can, and work with the schools. And I think the schools have got such a good reputation with our neighbourhood teams at the doors, which is not easy if the doors are always open for our teams to go in and to do those programmes, which is very important. Thank you. The next question is very specific to Durham City, and it responds is something that I get a lot of concerns raised to me, either when I go out to Durham or in sort of residents groups as well. What are the police doing? How are the police, sorry, responding to rough sleepers in Durham City?
And you know, this is a tricky one for us from a policing perspective, because rough sleeping itself isn't a crime. So the Vagrancy Act was repealed by the government and hasn't been replaced with anything. So it does limit us in terms of some of the powers we have in relation to begging and some of the other antisocial behaviour. But of course, Durham is a lovely city, and it does attract, as we describe, rough sleepers from all over, because we're a kind community. And, you know, the people out in the streets, they're often given quite considerable sums of money by whether that's local people of Durham or people visiting the city and tourists. So it's an attractive place for people to come. But of course, the side we see and the reports that you'll be getting is the antisocial element of rough sleeping. And, you know, often when, dare I say, that they're under the influence of alcohol, drugs, and it's that disruptive behaviour that we see, as opposed to what we would describe as aggressive begging, because they don't need to be aggressive because people will give them money, but it's the broader disruption and antisocial behaviour that you see. And what I would say, so what are we doing about it? I think that was the question. Is what we're trying to do is look at a public space protection order, and it has been looked at previously in the past. But that gives broader powers working with the local authority to disrupt some of this. I mean, these are tricky issues, but what we're doing is we're gathering the evidence base to demonstrate what the issues are. And then we've looked at, we've got surveys, we've been working with the local businesses, so the businesses particularly around on the market and around the centre there. And there's been recent news reporting from the market traders there around the disruption it's causing them. But of course, we're not the decision makers as to whether a public space protection order is granted, but there is an awful lot of support for it. And I think the work we're doing around the antisocial behaviour action plan and the work we spoke about earlier, and those powers will help us. But just to reassure anybody listening today, that it's very high up on the agenda. But we absolutely need to work in partnership to address it.
Thank you, Tonya. And I think part of that, you know, I was out in Durham last night, and it is about giving the right information, the help and support for those that find themselves homeless. So there's support out there for them, but then we do have like aggressive beggars and people who are in the area. And I think we have, I know our teams were out at the weekend again, engaging on that PSBO to get the feeling about what people's fear was, and also engaging with the people themselves around, you know, how they've been there, what can we do, etc. So I know it's not an easy fix, and it's not just a police issue, it's very much a partnership issue. And as we say, using the relevant tools and powers for each of our agencies to address that problem. So I think it's from our side is to get people help and support the need if they find themselves homeless, but then where you've got other areas it's more sort of aggressive and antisocial, that we have another tool in our box that we can actually use. So hopefully we'll progress that. And I appreciate again the work that the neighbourhood teams have done, linking with the businesses, linking with the traders within the town, but also speaking to the residents as well to get that information, because what we've been told is about evidence. I think we say we want to report things, but if we try to get additional tools, you need the evidence. And I think again collectively we've been building that up. So hopefully that's been something that we can progress to a positive outcome in the near future. The next question again, it's very, very timely, and it's something that we've, I do report this to the police and crime panel. It's about the concerns linking to mental health. So the question that the resident has asked is, how much time do you spend dealing with mental health related calls for service? And how can you ensure that these mental health related calls are effectively supported whilst also directing them to the most appropriate service?
I do actually have just a couple of figures here. So the force has recorded on average 1,100 incidents a month where mental health is a factor, and that's in the last 12 months. So 1,100 incidents a month on average over the last 12 months. So fairly significant. But it does include a range of types of incidents. So it could relate to somebody who's gone missing, a concern for safety, or incidents where mental health is identified to some vulnerability linked to a crime-related report. But in terms of how much demand this is for the police, it represents 7% of incidents reported to us. But it links into some national work that's being done around, and many people will have heard about right care, right person. And this is making sure that the right service is provided for the person in need. So we already have a lot of work and processes in place here in Durham Constabulary with partners. We've got really strong partnership arrangements in place, and we have triage in the control room to make sure the right people are sent. But we recognise that there's more to do. So we're currently on a programme of work around right care, right person, working with partners to look at some of the demand that the police are going to need to be a bit more robust about not attending, because we're not the right agency to deal, but making sure that partners have the right resources in place, that when police are not able to and no longer going, that they're in a position that they can pick it up. So we're very clear that we will work in partnership, and many people will have seen some of the reporting that came out from the Metropolitan Police saying that they were shutting the doors and no longer responding. I've reassured partners, and I'll reassure the public here, that that's not how we operate here in County Durham, for Durham and Darlington. We will not be doing that. It's very much working with partners. So we recognise we're not always the best resource to go, and partners recognise it as well. So I think it's important to give them credit on this call, to say everyone's really engaged in wanting to do the right thing. But over time, there definitely has been mission creep in terms of what the police's role is, and demand that we're picking up that shouldn't sit with us.
Thanks, Tonya. And I know when this was introduced and flagged up as an approach for all forces to adopt, that when I raised this with the chief and reassured that Durham's starting from quite a high bar to start with, because of the work that you've done around the mental health thing, and also the familiar faces. This is not new to us, this issue. It's been an increasing demand on our service, but understanding the response, understanding the issue, and as you say, the excellent partnership work within County Durham is ensuring that we're doing what we can. And I think this is just an opportunity to take it further. So obviously under Joe, that's been and previous chiefs probably, that's been given to what we've put the investment in to address that. But also I think it's worth reflecting that our new chief, Rachel Bacon, is leading on that area nationally. So I'm sure she'll be bringing that impetus and focus and passion that we've obviously got from internally here as well, to build on the existing work that we do in here in the force area. Thank you for that, Tonya. So I think this gives me the last question here, and I think it's a good one to end on, because it's really, really important for me as a PCC, but also, you know, for Joe and also the force around prevention and problem solving. So the question is, what prevention and problem solving initiatives have been implemented to reduce future victimisation and recurring serious acquisitive crime?
And really high priority for us as you know, Joy, and as I've mentioned probably more than once today, you know, that we do lead in the area of problem solving, big focus for us in the organisation, and we completely understand and find the fact that prevention is better, isn't it, rather than having to deal with the effects after. So we have we've developed a kind of a problem-solving ethos here in the force, and we have strategies around it that link in with national work. So whilst our focus is for what we're doing here for Durham and Darlington, it is linked in with a national focus and direction. So you heard Lindsay talking earlier about some of the intensification work that's done, where we see spikes in, you know, acquisitive crime, and that the neighbourhood pieces that we do around, I think we mentioned Operation Solitaire in Durham City, and some of the work we do over on the coast, and in South Durham. But each locality has a multi-agency problem-solving coordinator, and they're the link between partner agencies and the police for addressing some of those long-term problem solving issues. So they meet regularly on a monthly basis to share information, look at some of the problems that are coming out in their locality, particularly around repeat victims and reoccurring acquisitive crime, and look at how we can work together to have a joint partnership approach to the problem solving, to prevent future issues. And I know, Joy, you know, the success we've had around Op Varney, which is a Police and Crime Commissioner funded campaign to help reduce theft of Ford motor vehicles. Obviously, Lindsay spoke earlier around theft of motor vehicles. So lots going on in that prevention and problem solving place that will continue.
Thanks, Tanya. And I think when you say about, you know, Durham's reputation for problem solving, it's, you know, if I meet people, that's one of the fun is the Durham difference, and the problem solving is something that sort of comes to everybody's lips when they're talking. But I think just from a public's perspective, what they might not be aware of, as well as having that national recognition, we've been successful internationally, winning the sort of the Goldstein Award for the checkpoint, and being shortlisted for community peer mentors, for Operation Endurance, and I think parallelogram of recent times. So that's sort of the best of the best of the best at a national level. So I think understanding that work that you put in gives us an understanding, if we're putting resources in, are they being used effectively, are they delivering results, and how can we learn from that? And also the big thing is that it's not just about County Durham and Darlington. We share that experience and expertise and what works with the other forces, and there's you know, there's a lot of forces benefiting from the work that Durham have put in to developing their problem solving approach, and picking it up, adapting it, and obviously sharing it back, because we can always learn from others who put a different slant on our approach. So I think that this is a really very, very important subject, and I think that the questions that the presentation was really, really good, and the answers very, very thorough, to give that understanding of the complexities of neighbourhood crime, and also the opportunities and challenges. But, you know, sort of going forward, I think it's in a very positive way of addressing some of the public's concerns that's regularly raised with me. So this brings me now at the point to the end of this accountability meeting. I do hope you found the meeting useful, and I will continue to be the voice of the public on your behalf, asking the difficult questions, celebrating what the force is doing well, and identifying where I can help put County Durham and Darlington on the map nationally and as I've just mentioned, internationally as well. Keeping our officers visible and accessible is at the heart of the communities in which they serve, is paramount to me, and this will not change. The threats facing our community are changing. The methods of criminals are getting more sophisticated, and we cannot afford to sit still. This is why I will, and the chiefs and our officers will continue to rally the support of our MPs, local members and the government for a fairer funding formula to protect the good work that's already put us on the map. In a changing world, I'm proud of everything that's already been achieved and look forward to further success over the coming year. I remain on track to deliver my full police and crime plan and will continue to listen and serve the public to deliver on the issues that concern them most. On a final note, I'd like to take this opportunity to mention the force's inclusion in the new Home Office Antisocial Behaviour Trailblazer. We've secured £2 million and around the same time next year, and 4 million in the force area. As PCC, I have a zero tolerance to antisocial behaviour with key partners. This funding will allow extra hotspot policing patrols in the areas worst impacted by antisocial behaviour. And a new immediate justice scheme will make perpetrators of antisocial behaviour repair the damage they cause to victims and communities. I've also launched with partners a new case review process, providing victims with the opportunity of holding to account those agencies responsible for solving their antisocial behaviour problems. The force area is believed to be the first in the country to offer this new process, which gives victims the opportunity to attend case reviews and provide statements of the harms they've endured. Please visit my website for more information. On a final note, I would like to thank the Assistant Chief Constable and her team, and in particular Lindsay, for the presentation today. I think this recording will be online, and we will be promoting this opportunity to find out more about neighbourhood policing as we visit the communities of cross County Durham and Darlington. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.